Today I've got a knife review for you. I've been a fan of some of the Dmitry Sinkovich designs, and I've had one of his other ZT design models on my list of wanted knives for a while, but haven't purchased one yet. When I saw the ZT-0460 pop up on the secondhand market for a fair price, I jumped on it, since it's one of the smaller ZTs that are legal to carry in my state. So as I was saying, this is the ZT-0460. You can see it's titanium on the lock side. It's milled titanium. It's an upswept Persian design, and it's S35 VN steel. Here's a little bit more detail on the lock side. I like that they've left the milling marks in here. It is a captured pivot. And here is the presentation side. Now this carbon fiber is a little bit controversial. ZT calls it red carbon fiber, but it's not red at all. It's more copper or bronze colored. It's something you'll like or dislike. I like it. This knife only weighs 67.2 grams, and if I compare it to a few others here, you can see it's pretty light. Here's a Benchmade 940. It's 81 grams. Here's a Benchmade mini grip, 74 grams. And a Spyderco Delica 4, 65 grams. That low weight helps make it a great EDC. This clip is mostly a deep carry design. It's a little bit of the knife sticks out, about that much or so. It's not relocatable anywhere else on the knife. Sorry, lefties. I wish it was a little bit deeper carry, just because I like deep carry knives. What I don't like on this knife clip is that it's painted. You can already see it's wearing. Some from the previous owner, some from myself as well. I think for this price of knife, you really should have a powder-coated clip or something that's parkerized, a finish that's going to last longer. I also don't care for the writing here on the clip. If I'm having this sticking out my pockets, I really don't want it to say 0 tolerance. I just as soon have the ZT logo or nothing at all. A good example of comparisons would be Spyderco and Benchmade. They just have their logo stamped into the clip themselves. That, for me, that's perfect. The blade here is similar to an upswept Persian design, and it's got a very fine tip on it there. The blade stock isn't thin, but it's not real thick either. It's listed as a 3.25-inch blade, and it's nearly full flat ground. You do have some flats up here on the top, which should help if you're using one of the captured sharpening systems. However, the sharpening is something on this that is a bit of a pain. Just because this point here extends so far out into the blade, you'll have a hard time getting into this back edge of this blade unless you're using a system like a Spyderco Sharp Maker, which is what I have. There isn't much of a sharpening choil here, but it's fine in my opinion. One thing I kind of dislike here is the grind on the blade itself. It's a fairly aggressive grind, and you can see some of the grind marks in there still. And you can feel it if you run your fingernail across it or hear it. I just would like it to be a little bit smoother. All your other manufacturers, such as Spyderco on lesser expensive knives, the grind lines are still here, but they're much shallower. So here are some popular other knives just to kind of give you a size comparison of the blade and the handle. The ZT-0460 is on the bottom. The Benchmade 940 there is the next one up in green, and Spyderco Delica is at the top here. All three are fantastic EDC knives. It's kind of hard for me to pick which is my favorite. It's probably the 940 out of these three, or the Delica 4. I really do like the ZT as well, and I'll get more into that here in a second. I got my ZT-0460 used, as I had commented on, so I can't comment on out-of-box sharpness. My used copy wasn't quite up to my sharpening standards when I received it, so I tried sharpening it on my Spyderco Sharp Maker with only decent results. I ended up giving it to a coworker to sharpen who has a side business, and he improved it quite a bit. And this, so far, I've been able to keep it up with just maintenance of stropping with light compound. The 0460 uses CPM S35 VN steel, and from reading online, this is considered a super steel, and it's supposed to be a superior steel to S30V, and easier to sharpen too. As I mentioned, I had some initial trouble getting it sharpened, however, upkeep's been minimal since then, and I anticipate I'll be able to get at it now with my Sharp Maker, and it should be fine when it eventually does dull. One thing also to note, this knife does have a steel lock bar insert. that is replaceable, which is nice. How's the action? This knife uses the ZT-KVT ball bearings, and it's smooth and fast opening most of the time. And let me explain. Easy, fast open there, no problems, closes nice, really fast deployment. It's nicely balanced knife, right almost on the pivot, just right behind the pivot there. The problem comes when you're holding this knife. So if I got my finger on the flipper here, thumb on top, I want to put my fingers naturally on that lock bar, but at that point you're holding the D10 in and it doesn't want to fire. So you have to kind of learn to hold it a little bit lower than that, and since this handle isn't very big, there isn't a ton of room to do this. I don't have huge hands. It's not been a huge problem for me once I kind of learned, but if you don't get your fingers in the right place and hold on that lock bar, it is hard to open. This isn't really a fault of the action, it's just a fault of this thin handle design. The centering on my example is good, and that's the other thing I wanted to mention here is how far this blade comes back. Not all my other knives do that, so especially flippers. So what I found is if you have long sleeves and you're holding it like this, and that sleeve comes down, it's easy to kind of get the blade trapped and not want to deploy it. So it's just something else to keep in mind about deployment. The flipper tab itself doesn't stick up very far out of the knife, which I like. It allows you to slip your hand in your pocket, but at the same time it makes deployment slightly harder. Mine's nicely rounded, there's no sharp edges, but this jimping that's here really isn't very functional. This is a very space-efficiently designed knife. It's a little smaller than I expected it to be in the handle region, but it's not too small. Again, fairly similar to this 940 in size, just a little bit smaller handle, and that swept design actually makes it carry in the pocket nicely, and where the 940 doesn't have that. Personally, I like that Persian blade design, but it might not be for everybody. If I look at thickness between these two, they're very close, with the edge going to the ZT. When I compare this to my 940 here, which might be my ultimate EDC, it's almost as good, but not quite. While the 940's blade shape isn't quite as good of a slicer as the 0460, I find the blade design to be more useful for the type of cutting things I do, and it's easier to sharpen and strop. I don't fear snapping the tip on my 940 like I do on the 0460 for any harder cutting tasks. I'm not a super hard user, and I use my EDC knives for civilian type tasks, opening packages, mail, maybe a little bit of food prep, and package opening. For those purposes, both knives work well. As far as the action, I really like the access lock a lot, but at the same time, a flipper is really fun to play with. And the ZT-0460 has the strongest detent, so there's no way you're going to gravity deploy this thing, unlike my access locks. The ZT-0460 is a really nice knife and decently priced for the money for a titanium carbon fiber NS35VN. My conclusion is you're either going to like the design of the 0460 knife or dislike it. You've maybe seen other reviewers who end up disliking it kind of because of that and because of the blade shape. Personally, I love the look of this knife, and the copper bronzy colored carbon fiber is pretty cool too. I like that the scales are milled to kind of match both sides here, and they've left the milling marks on there. I do wish that the handle here was just a little bit thicker. I mean, the whole thing could be just a little bit wider, I guess. For me, the blade is just about perfect size and length. I like the ZT-0460, and it's getting carried a lot right now for me. Check in the description to where you can pick up the 0460 on Amazon below if you're interested. Let me know what you think of this knife review, and if you have the Z0460 or another ZT knife.